For 20 years, I taught resilience. I spoke about the tools for managing stress, for finding meaning in suffering. Then, one Tuesday afternoon in November, I found myself in my car, parked across the street from my own office, unable to turn the key. The rain on the windshield blurred the world into a gray watercolor, and all I could think was, I can't go in there. That was the beginning of the end, or so I thought. My hands were on the steering wheel, 10 and 2 like they taught us in driver's education. The leather was cold. I remember that. The way the cold seemed to seep from the wheel into my palms, up through my wrists, settling somewhere deep in my chest. I'd been sitting there for maybe 15 minutes, maybe longer. Time had become slippery by then. Across the street through the rain, I could see the yellow glow of my office window on the 3rd floor. Mrs. Patterson was probably already in the waiting room. She was always early, always 15 minutes early with her crossword puzzle and her thermos of tea. I'd seen her every Thursday at 4 o'clock for 3 years, and I couldn't remember a single thing we'd talked about the week before. Not one word. That's when I knew. Not suspected, not worried, knew. Something inside me had broken, and I'd been pretending it hadn't for far too long. Let me go back. Because burnout doesn't arrive like a storm. It doesn't announce itself. It's more like a slow leak, a hairline fracture that widens so gradually you don't notice until the whole foundation starts to shift. I'd been a therapist for 23 years by then. I built my practice from nothing, one patient at a time. I was good at what I did. I helped people. That meant something to me. In the beginning, every session felt sacred. I remember the weight of it, the privilege of being trusted with someone's pain, their secrets, their darkest fears. I'd drive home some nights with tears in my eyes, not from sadness exactly, but from the sheer humanity of it all. The courage it takes to sit across from a stranger and say, "I'm not okay." But somewhere along the way, that feeling started to fade. It happened so slowly, I didn't see it. First, I added one more patient to my weekly schedule, then another. Then another. The waiting list grew. People needed help. Who was I to turn them away? My mornings started at 7. My evenings ended at 8, sometimes 9. I'd eat lunch at my desk between sessions, usually something cold and forgettable from the deli downstairs. The coffee in my office pot was always lukewarm by afternoon, bitter and stale. But I drank it anyway because I needed something to keep me sharp. The case files piled up on my desk. Progress notes I should have written immediately. I'd write them late at night at home, hunched over my laptop while my wife slept. The blue light from the screen would burn my eyes. I'd squint at my own handwriting from sessions, trying to remember what T anxious mother visit meant. Which patient was T? What mother visit? I told myself it was temporary. Just a busy season. Once I got through this month, I'd cut back. But the month became 3 months. Then a year. Then 5 years. The mask I wore became heavier. Every morning, I'd sit in my office before the first patient arrived. I had this ritual. I'd close my eyes and take 3 deep breaths. I'd straighten my posture, relax my face, and arrange myself into the shape of someone who had it together. Dr. Elias Hart. Calm, compassionate, present. But underneath, I was hollow. The fluorescent lights in my office hummed. Have you ever noticed that? That low, persistent buzz that you don't hear until you do, and then you can't unhear it. It became the soundtrack to my days. That hum and the sound of my own voice saying the same reassuring things over and over. You're doing the best you can. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. Be gentle with yourself. Words I no longer believed for myself. The symptoms crept in like shadows at dusk, so gradual I could explain them away. First, the exhaustion. Not the kind that sleep fixes. This was deeper, a bone tiredness that made my whole body feel leaden. I'd wake up in the morning already depleted, as if I'd been running all night in my dreams. Which, in a way, I had been. Then came the cynicism. It started as a whisper in the back of my mind during sessions. A patient would tell me about their anxiety, and I'd think, yes, I know. We've been over this. Someone would cry, and instead of feeling moved, I'd feel impatient, annoyed even, then immediately guilty for feeling that way. I started to notice my own detachment. I'd nod in all the right places. I'd make the appropriate sounds of empathy. But inside, nothing. Just this vast, empty space where compassion used to live. And the worst part? I became very good at faking it. At home, I was a stranger. My wife, Sarah, she'd try to talk to me about her day, about something funny our daughter said, about plans for the weekend. And I'd be there, physically present, but my mind would be somewhere else, replaying sessions, worrying about the patient who wasn't getting better, rehearsing difficult conversations I needed to have. One night, Sarah said to me, "You're not here anymore." Not angrily, sadly. She said it gently, like she was diagnosing a terminal illness. And I snapped at her. I said something cruel about how I was working to support our family, how she didn't understand the pressure I was under. The look on her face, I can still see it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me, and I felt like the biggest hypocrite in the world. Here I was, a therapist who specialized in relationships and emotional health, and I was destroying my own marriage through neglect. I started having this recurring thought. It would come to me during sessions, unbidden and intrusive. I'm a fraud. Have you ever felt like an imposter in your own life? Like you're playing a role and everyone believes the performance except you. That's where I was living. In that gap between who I appeared to be and who I actually was. I'd sit across from a patient struggling with work-life balance, and I'd offer suggestions about setting boundaries, about self-care, about knowing your limits. And the whole time, a voice in my head would be screaming, "You don't do any of this. You're telling them to do things you can't do yourself." The worst sessions were the ones where I could see myself in the patient. A woman came to see me. I'll call her Anna. She was a nurse at the city hospital. She'd been working double shifts for years, taking on extra responsibilities, always saying yes when they asked her to cover for someone. She came to me because she'd started having panic attacks at work. Anna sat in my office and said, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I used to love my job. Now I dread going in. I feel like I'm failing everyone, my patients, my colleagues, my family, but I can't stop. If I stop, I don't know who I am." I remember The room went very quiet after she said that. The fluorescent lights hummed. I could hear the clock ticking on my wall. And I felt this cold wave of recognition wash over me. She wasn't talking about nursing. She was talking about me. I opened my mouth to respond, and nothing came out. For a full 5 seconds, maybe more, I just sat there, frozen. Anna looked at me with concern. "Dr. Hart, are you okay?" I recovered. Of course I did. I gave her a reassuring smile, apologized for the brief pause, said something about how powerfully I could hear the pain in what she was describing. Then I launched into therapist mode. We talked about boundaries, about the cost of chronic self-sacrifice, about the difference between caring for others and destroying yourself in the process. It was a good session. She left feeling heard and validated. She even smiled as she scheduled her next appointment. And I sat alone in my office afterward, feeling absolutely nothing. That's when the numbness really set in. Not sadness, not anxiety, just a void. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left only the shell. I'd go through entire days on autopilot. Sessions would blur together. I'd drive home and not remember the route I'd taken. I'd eat dinner and not taste the food. My daughter would tell me about a problem at school, and I'd give her advice that sounded wise. But I wasn't really there. I was watching myself from a distance, like an actor in a play I no longer wanted to be in. The breaking point came on a Thursday. It was supposed to be an ordinary day. 6 sessions scheduled. The first was with a young man. I'll call him David. David had been seeing me for about 4 months. He was 26, struggling with depression and a sense of purposelessness. He worked in IT, lived alone, spent most of his free time gaming online. He'd come to therapy because, in his words, "I feel like I'm just going through the motions. Nothing matters." That Thursday, David came in and sat down in his usual spot. He looked tired. He always looked tired. I asked him how his week had been. He shrugged. "Same as always. Work, home, nothing changes." I nodded. I asked follow-up questions. Had he tried any of the strategies we'd discussed? The morning routine, the journaling, getting outside for a walk? He shook his head. I know I should. I don't have the energy. What's the point? And then he said something that shattered me. He looked directly at me and said, "Dr. Hart, do you ever feel like you're just pretending? Like you're doing all the right things, saying all the right words, but inside you're empty?" I stared at him. This composite sketch of so many patients I'd seen, this amalgamation of struggles I'd witnessed. He was holding up a mirror. And in that mirror, I saw myself with terrifying clarity. "Yes," I said, quietly, almost a whisper. "Yes, I do." David looked surprised. Then something shifted in his face. A kind of recognition. "Really?" I shouldn't have said what I said next. It violated every boundary of professional conduct. But the words came out anyway. I feel that way every single day. The session ended shortly after. I don't remember what else we talked about. I remember David leaving, looking somehow lighter, as if my confession had lifted something from his shoulders. But for me, the floor had opened up. I canceled the rest of my appointments that day. I told my assistant I was ill, which wasn't a lie. I was sick. I just hadn't been honest about it. I drove home in a daze. Sarah was in the kitchen when I walked in. She took one look at my face and said, "What happened?" I sat down at the kitchen table, and for the first time in years, I told the truth. I can't do this anymore. I'm burning out. I might already be burnout. I don't know. I just know I can't keep going like this. She sat across from me. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "I've been waiting for you to say that," she said. "I've been watching you disappear for 3 years. 3 years. That's how long I'd been drowning while pretending to swim." The next week was the hardest of my professional life. I had to make a phone call I'd never imagined making. I called my old supervisor, Dr. Margaret Chen. She'd retired from practice 5 years earlier, but she still consulted and provided supervision for therapists in the community. I sat in my office, door closed, phone in my hand. I must have picked it up and put it down a dozen times before I finally dialed. When she answered, her voice was warm. "Elias, what a lovely surprise." "Margaret," I said, and then I couldn't speak. The words stuck in my throat. "What's going on?" she asked gently. "I need help," I said. 3 words. The 3 hardest words I'd ever spoken. "I'm burnt out. I'm not okay. And I don't know what to do." There was a pause. Not an uncomfortable pause, a gentle one. Then Margaret said, "Thank you for telling me." That took courage. We talked for over an hour. She asked me about my caseload, my self-care practices, or lack thereof, my support system, my sleep, my relationships. She listened without judgment. And at the end, she said something I'll never forget. "Elias, you've spent 2 decades helping people heal. Now it's your turn. You need to become the patient." Becoming the patient. I can't describe how terrifying that felt. I took a 3-month sabbatical. I had to reduce my caseload carefully, ethically. Some patients I referred to colleagues. Others I continued to see remotely once a week until they could transition. It took 6 weeks to wind down properly. And then, I started therapy myself. Margaret referred me to someone she trusted, a therapist named Dr. Rashid. He was younger than me, maybe in his 40s. His office was small, cozy, with plants on the windowsill and soft lighting. I remember sitting in the chair across from him for the first time, feeling absurdly self-conscious. I'd sat in his position thousands of times. Now I was on the other side. "Tell me what brings you here," he said. And I broke down. Right there, in the first 5 minutes, I broke down completely. 23 years of held-back emotion came pouring out. I cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal. Dr. Rashid handed me a box of tissues and sat quietly. He didn't try to stop me or comfort me or fix it. He just witnessed. And in that witnessing, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Permission to fall apart. Over the next few months, I learned things about myself I'd been avoiding for decades. I learned that I'd been using my patients' pain as a shield. As long as I was focused on their suffering, I didn't have to look at my own. My role as healer gave me purpose, but it also gave me an excuse to avoid being human. I learned that my need to help came from a place of fear, not just compassion. Fear of being useless. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of confronting the parts of myself I didn't like. I learned that empathy and self-sacrifice are not the same thing. For years, I'd confused the two. I thought being a good therapist meant giving everything, every ounce of energy, every waking hour, every piece of myself. But Dr. Rashid helped me see that's not empathy. That's martyrdom. And martyrs don't heal people. They just burn themselves out. The hardest session we had was when Dr. Rashid asked me, "Why did you become a therapist?" I gave him the standard answer. The one I'd given at grad school interviews, the one I told people at dinner parties. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference. He nodded. Then he said, "What's underneath that?" I sat with the question for a long time. And then, slowly, the truth emerged. I wanted to be needed, I said. I wanted to be the person people couldn't live without. Because if I was indispensable, then I mattered. Then I had value. There it was, the root of it all. I'd built my entire identity around being the helper, the healer, the one with answers. And when I couldn't sustain that, when I started to crack under the weight of it, I felt like I was losing myself. But here's what I discovered. I wasn't losing myself. I was finally finding myself underneath the role. Recovery wasn't linear. Some days were better than others. Some days I'd wake up feeling lighter, almost hopeful. Other days the weight would come crashing back and I'd wonder if I'd ever feel normal again. But slowly, things shifted. I started doing small things. I went for walks in the morning. Really walks. Not just exercise, but mindful walks where I paid attention to the world around me. The way light filtered through trees, the sound of birds, the feel of cold air on my face. I started reading again. Not case studies or clinical journals, fiction, poetry, things that fed my soul instead of my professional identity. I reconnected with Sarah. We started having dinner together, really together, without my phone, without my mind wandering to work. We talked, we laughed, we remembered why we'd fallen in love. And I remembered why I'd become a therapist in the first place. Not because I wanted to be indispensable, but because at my core, I believed in the resilience of the human spirit. I believed that people could heal. I believed that sitting with someone in their pain, truly sitting with them, not trying to fix them or save them, that mattered. After 3 months, I went back to work, but I went back different. I cut my caseload in half. I stopped taking back-to-back sessions. I built in time between patients, not just to write notes, but to breathe, to reset, to remind myself that I'm human too. I started being honest with my patients when I didn't have the answer. I stopped pretending to be the expert who had it all figured out. Sometimes I'd say, "I don't know, let's figure this out together." And you know what? The work became sacred again. Not because I was different, but because I was more myself. I still think about that Thursday in November. The rain on the windshield, my hands on the cold steering wheel, the moment I couldn't go in. At the time, it felt like failure. like I'd reached the end of my capacity as a therapist, maybe even as a person. But now I see it differently. That moment wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The beginning of learning how to be human in a profession that demands so much. The beginning of understanding that healing isn't about being strong all the time. It's about being honest about when you're not. I'm still a therapist. I still sit across from people in pain. I still bear witness to suffering and struggle and the messy, beautiful work of becoming whole. But I'm different now. I'm scarred. That's what burnout does. It leaves scars. But scars aren't just wounds. They're evidence of healing. They're proof that you survived something that tried to break you. I'm more patient now, with myself and with others. I'm more comfortable with silence, with uncertainty, with not having all the answers. I'm better at recognizing when someone is drowning because I know what drowning feels like. And I'm more honest. When a patient comes to me exhausted and depleted and says, "I don't know how much more I can take," I don't just offer clinical strategies. I tell them my story, not in detail, but enough. Enough to let them know they're not alone. Enough to give them permission to admit they're struggling. Because that's what saved me. Not a technique or a strategy or a self-care routine, though those things helped. What saved me was admitting, finally and fully, I am not okay. There's this idea in our culture that asking for help is weakness. That admitting you can't handle something means you've failed. But I've learned, the hard way, that the opposite is true. It takes courage to say, I need help. It takes courage to stop pretending. It takes courage to take off the mask and show the world your exhausted, struggling, imperfect face. That's the real work, not the fixing, not the healing, the admitting. I think about David sometimes, that composite patient who held up the mirror. I wonder if he knows what a gift he gave me that day. Probably not. That's how therapy works sometimes. You never know which moment will change everything. I think about Anna too, the nurse who couldn't stop. I saw her again recently, not as her therapist, but running into her at the grocery store. She looked different, lighter. She told me she'd cut back her hours, started saying no, learned to set boundaries. It saved my life, she said. Then she smiled. Thank you for helping me see that. I wanted to tell her that she'd helped me too, that her courage to admit she was drowning gave me permission to do the same. But I just smiled and said, I'm glad you're doing better. If you're listening to this and you're burnout, exhausted, running on empty, I want you to know something. It's okay to stop. It's okay to admit you can't keep going like this. It's okay to need help. You're not weak. You're not failing. You're human. And being human means you have limits. It means you can't pour from an empty cup. It means sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is say, I need to rest. That Thursday in November, I thought it was my lowest point. But it was actually the moment I started climbing back up. Not to where I was before, but to somewhere better, somewhere more honest, somewhere more whole. The rain on the windshield that day, it didn't stop. Eventually, I turned the car around and drove home. I called my assistant and told her to reschedule my appointments. I walked into my house, sat down with Sarah, and said the truest thing I'd said in years. I can't do this anymore, and I need help. That was the year I almost quit, but it was also the year I learned how to live again.